Ah, the tomato. It's healthy, it's delicious, and it's also the name of a new custom firmware. A lot of people don't like tomatoes to eat, but there's not much you're not going to like with Tomato OS. Today's video is about Tomato OS. This custom firmware is poised to breathe a little more life into the TrimUI Smart Pro, which I originally wasn't keen on. However, in a little bit of serendipity, the TrimUI Smart Pro has recently been on sale at various AliExpress storefronts for around $50 to $55. One time I even saw it for under $50. Gary doesn't believe me, but it happened. It happened. At that price point, and with this new custom firmware, the TrimUI Smart Pro suddenly becomes a much more viable option. This is a sneak peek at Tomato OS, but when it goes live, you're going to be able to download the firmware from the link in our description. So once you download it, you're going to want to throw everything onto a FAT32 formatted card. It's important that it's FAT32. I was fat when I was 32. Fat now. Extract everything from the zip file to the root of your SD card, and then there's going to be a 1.0.3 firmware folder. Take the AWIMG file from there and put that on the root too. You can add your ROMs and stuff now or later, but your next step is going to be to insert the SD card into the handheld and press power and volume down at the same time. You should hold them down until you see a green progress bar appear, at which point you just have to wait. Once it's done, you have firmware 1.0.3 with Tomato OS on top, and you're good to go. Yes, we are in the correct version. Excellent. Let's verify here. We are on version 1.03. We did it. They've changed the themes. So as you scroll through and say, let's go to Atari 800, look at that beautiful picture of an Atari. You can go through, oh heck, let's pick a random one. DOSBox. That's a DOS terminal that appears to be running ChatGPT. I think they said in this build they're missing 3 or 4 pictures, but otherwise, it's a very fully fleshed out theme, and I really like it. Look, there's the Family Computer Disk System. A couple other cool new features. You have the function key setting. So normally, this will turn your high performance mode on or off, but you can change it to turn the LED on or off. I have mine set to LED off. You can change it so this function key turns on quiet mode, silent mode, power save, which is what the default was, performance mode, ooh, or turbo for all of the available face buttons. You also have USB storage, which means you can, plug a USB drive into here and take things off of storage. You got 2048 because maybe you don't want to play games. Maybe you want to play 2048. You can add and remove your logo. And there you go. Now it says Zoo Reviews. If you want to go back to the original logo, just go to Restore Logo. You also have the ability to go into RetroArch directly from here. So if you wanted to mess with hotkeys or global shader or configuration settings, you just go in RetroArch here, save your configuration file after you're done, and quit. You can sort your favorite list, you can start the background music, you can stop the background music, you can swap the background music, so you can put your own song in for background, swap your logo, we went over that, and a user guide. Display now has the ability for a lock screen time, which is kind of neat. You also can throttle your rumble up and down. So one of my earlier complaints was this. Sounds like a belt sander. So I just turn it off. I don't know if that's universal or if I'm just blessed with a nice rumble motor. Obviously you got Wi-Fi, hotspot, themes, key map, all that jazz. So when I originally reviewed the TrimUI Smart Pro, I was less than impressed, mostly because it was $80 and it gave you less performance than the X55. I was kind of down on this because for 80 bucks, it gave you a nice screen and nice ergonomics, but a lot less performance than the X55, which is also a similar sized, wide unit. And the X55 can play PSP, Dreamcast, all sorts of stuff with no limitations, whereas this guy struggled a little bit. Now, after using it a little bit more after the initial review, I've started to warm up to it. And there were 2 main things that made me come back and do this video. First, you got Tomato OS, which is developing very nicely. 1.0.4 is on the way, where they're talking about adding Vulkan support, which should honestly help some of the games this struggles at. And the second reason is, this is going for like 45 bucks on AliExpress now. See if I can put a link in the description, but I can show some screenshots. If you look around AliExpress, you can get this for around $50 now. And a lot of times you can get it for 50 bucks and free shipping. So $50 for this now becomes a really viable budget system. And it's not just for wide games. So naturally you want to play a ton of PSP on here. And you can play a fair amount of PSP. Some of the higher end titles are a little sluggish, but this really excels as a budget Game Boy Advance or a budget 8-bit, 16-bit PlayStation game. And because of the way it's set up with intelligent bezels and with scaling and with shaders and all the other stuff they have running in the background, your lower end systems are actually going to perform well and look amazing. Because again, this is a beautiful 720p 5-inch screen. So just to show you what I'm talking about, let's go try some. Ooh. So yeah, I mean, even though you're not using all the real estate, you have this beautiful bezel, which to me makes it feel like it's more, I don't know, custom made for this. You don't just have a generic RetroArch screen. You got a bezel, you have everything kind of preset for you, and I like that. And it doesn't look too bad on this big screen, because even though you're not using the full screen, and you could fiddle with the aspect ratio if you wanted, but this bezel, I think, really helps. I got this game for free for the NES because my mom bought me for Christmas or my birthday a subscription to Nintendo Power, and the game came free because they didn't know how to market RPGs back then. I will help you. My name is Zoo. These two speakers are legit. I mean, listen to that. Almost all of the 4x3 systems do come with these bezels. So you see here, Game Boy, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy Advance. Game Boy Advance is honestly where this thing shines, because now this is probably your best bet for a super budget Game Boy Advance machine that not only plays Game Boy Advance well, but gives you a huge screen, even with these cool bezels, but a huge screen, beautiful vibrant colors, wonderful music, even though the Game Boy Advance didn't have a great sound chip, and you get very responsive play in a form factor quite similar to the original Game Boy Advance. This easily replaces the 351p as my cheapo Game Boy Advance machine. Now, I was originally pretty hard on this for PSP performance, because PSP is not ideal on this. And when it was $80, I felt like you had a much better option in the Powkiddy X55. However, with the potential of Vulkan support for this in the next version of Tomato OS, and as we all know, Vulkan usually does a lot better than OpenGL, I'm not going to make a 100% promise, but there's a strong likelihood you're going to eke out enough performance with that Vulkan upgrade that some of these games that before it didn't play very well, they're going to be very playable on here. Again, for $80, I feel like this performance ain't great. If you can get it for $45 or for $50, whoa, brother, that's a whole different animal. And if you're just looking at maybe JRPGs or things that aren't super graphically intensive, right now they play okay. Oh, now you're in for it, Gary. Shouldn't have done that. Dead. So I guess that brings us to, what did we learn? Now, this hasn't been a super in-depth video, and we've already reviewed the TrimUI Smart Pro. So the main things we learned were, A, Tomato OS is a very cool custom firmware that is proceeding apace. And 2, as the TrimUI Smart Pro itself gets cheaper and cheaper, the value of this skyrockets. For $80, there were competitors out there that could beat it. For $50, you got yourself a handheld that'll play all your classic retro titles. It really excels at Game Boy Advance. And as Tomato OS matures, I'm not going to promise, but there's an extremely high likelihood that you will have much better PSP performance in addition to better performance overall, because they are going to try to incorporate fixes, enhancements, and the Vulkan backend for emulators that can support it. For a while now, the Anbernic 351P has been my go-to Game Boy Advance machine, and I still like it. I still like the colorway, and I still like it for what it is. But if you can get the TrimUI Smart Pro for $50, get out of here, Anbernic. Oh boy. So either if you have a TrimUI Smart Pro already, or you're going to get one for $50, strongly consider Tomato OS. Our buddy Tech Toy Tinkerer has made it, and he's done a pretty good job on it. Thanks again to Tech Toy Tinker for giving me a little sneak peek and walking me through a little bit of this setup, so I could show everybody that not only the TrimUI Smart Pro has gone down in price, it's gone up in performance. How do you like that for wordplay? Huh? You don't care. If you like Tech Toy Tinker's stuff, maybe give him a like. I don't know if he has a Ko-fi Or what? Maybe message him on our Discord and say, hey, good job. Because, it's hard being a dev. I don't know how to do any of this. I'm pretty sure most of you don't know how to do any of it, but they do. And they'll take something that's kind of not a turd, but something that's not as good as it could be, and they make it better. And most of them, if not all of them, do it for free. Because if you're a dev and you start charging for early access to your emulator, bad things happen to you and everything falls apart.